Have you ever stopped to think about how many of the objects we use every single day actually came from a time we often call the Dark Ages? It's a name that suggests shadow, stagnation, and a lack of progress, but what if I told you that label is one of history's greatest misconceptions? Picture your morning. You wake up, check the time on a clock, put on your glasses to see clearly, fasten your shirt with buttons, and maybe even glance at an hourglass for decoration. Each of these seemingly modern conveniences has roots that stretch back more than half a millennium, born from the minds of medieval inventors whose brilliance has been largely forgotten. We're about to embark on a journey into one of the most misunderstood periods in human history, the Middle Ages. Far from a bleak interval of ignorance, this was an era of astonishing creativity, fierce curiosity, and engineering marvels that would not be fully appreciated until centuries later. Think of Gothic cathedrals reaching defiantly toward the heavens, intricate clocks measuring time with breathtaking precision, and navigational tools that guided explorers across uncharted oceans. These were not accidents of history. They were the products of visionary thinking crafted in workshops, monasteries, and universities by people who dared to imagine a different world. In this video, we will uncover 26 medieval inventions that were genuinely centuries ahead of their time. From the mechanical clock that organized society's rhythm to the humble button that revolutionized how we dress, each invention tells a story of human ingenuity thriving against all odds. You'll discover how these breakthroughs laid the groundwork for everything from modern science and industry to the comforts we take for granted today. So settle in and prepare to see the Middle Ages in a whole new light, not as a period of darkness, but as a beacon of innovation whose glow still illuminates our lives. To truly grasp the incredible ingenuity behind the inventions we're about to explore, we first need to step into the world that created them. The Middle Ages, often unfairly dismissed as a 1,000-year gap of darkness between the glories of Rome and the Renaissance, was in reality a period of dynamic change, fierce intellectual curiosity, and profound technological ferment. This era, stretching from roughly the 5th to the late 15th century, began not with a whimper but with the dramatic collapse of the Roman Empire, which sent shockwaves across Europe and created a vacuum filled with new kingdoms, new ideas, and new challenges. Far from a monolithic period of stagnation, it was a time of incredible diversity and adaptation. While popular culture might paint a picture of mud-covered peasants and superstitious monks, the truth is far more fascinating. This was a world connected by sprawling trade networks like the Silk Road, which didn't just move silks and spices but acted as a superhighway for knowledge, carrying groundbreaking ideas in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine from the vibrant intellectual centers of the Islamic world and Asia into the heart of Europe. Within the walls of monasteries, Benedictine monks became the unexpected guardians of knowledge, meticulously preserving and copying ancient texts, while also conducting their own experiments in everything from metallurgy to timekeeping. Meanwhile, in bustling medieval cities, guilds of craftsmen, from blacksmiths to glassmakers, functioned like modern research and development labs, fiercely protecting their trade secrets while relentlessly innovating to improve their wares. These skilled artisans were the engineers of their day, pushing the boundaries of materials science and mechanics with every clock they built and every cathedral they raised towards the heavens. And we cannot overlook the monumental contributions from scholars in the Islamic world, who during Europe's so-called Dark Ages were making staggering advances in fields like optics, chemistry, and navigation. Figures like Al-Jazari, whose book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices detailed automated machines and complex gear systems, were laying down principles of automation that wouldn't be fully realized in the West for centuries. It was within this vibrant, interconnected, and often tumultuous crucible a world rebuilding itself, seeking new solutions to problems of survival, faith, commerce, and power, that necessity truly became the mother of invention. This rich and complex historical context is the essential key that unlocks the genius of the marvels we are about to discover. But what does that phrase actually mean, to be centuries ahead of your time? It's more than just being innovative. It's about creating something that seems to leapfrog over generations of gradual progress. An invention is truly ahead of its time when it incorporates principles, materials, or a design philosophy so advanced that the broader society lacks the context to even fully appreciate it, let alone replicate it. These aren't just slight improvements on existing tools, they are conceptual breakthroughs that feel almost alien to their own era. They often rely on a deep understanding of scientific concepts like mechanics, optics, or chemistry that wouldn't be formally defined or widely taught for hundreds of years. Think of it as a single, brilliant mind sketching the blueprint for a technology that the world won't be ready to build until the supporting industries, scientific theories, and even the cultural mindset have finally caught up. THIS Chinese letter, this quality of being ahead of one's time often manifests in two fascinating ways. First, it can represent a spark of isolated genius, an inventor who, through sheer intuition and observation, solves a complex problem without the formal training or textbooks we would consider essential today. They are working it out from first principles, reverse engineering nature itself. The second way is perhaps even more intriguing. It can hint at pockets of lost knowledge. There are cases where a technology appears, is used brilliantly for a period, and then the technique is somehow lost or forgotten, only to be independently reinvented much later. This suggests that the collective understanding of an era can sometimes fracture, and brilliant ideas can fall through the cracks of history, waiting to be rediscovered. When we examine these medieval marvels through our modern lens, we're not just giving them a patronizing nod for being clever. We are genuinely recognizing concepts we thought were born in our own age. We see in their clockwork the beginnings of automation and precision engineering. In their optical lenses, we see the foundational principles of light manipulation that would lead to telescopes, microscopes, and eventually cameras and lasers. Their chemical apparatuses weren't just for mystical alchemy. They were early laboratories exploring molecular transformation. This perspective allows us to appreciate these inventions not as dusty relics, but as the first few pages of a story we are still writing today. They are a powerful reminder that the trajectory of human progress is not a straight line, but a winding path dotted with moments of extraordinary vision that light the way forward. Now consider the profound shift this single machine triggered in the human experience. Before its arrival, time was a fluid concept, dictated by the sun's arc across the sky or the slow, constant drip of water in a clepsydra. Life was governed by natural rhythms, the crow of a rooster at dawn, the fading light at dusk. The mechanical clock changed all of that. It introduced the radical idea of abstract, quantifiable, and equal hours, creating a framework that could be shared and synchronized across an entire community. For the first time, a town could function on a collective schedule. The bell in the clock tower would ring to mark the opening of the city gates, the start of the market, the changing of guards, and the call to prayer. This wasn't just about convenience. It was the birth of public time, a shared metronome that orchestrated the complex symphony of urban life and laid the groundwork for the modern concept of punctuality and coordinated labor. The genius of these early timekeepers lies in their intricate internal heart, the escapement mechanism. This is the component that truly sets them apart, a clever device that regulates the release of energy from a falling weight, converting a constant force into a steady, oscillating motion. Imagine a weighted rope slowly unwinding from a drum. Without control, it would just spin wildly. The escapement acts as a gatekeeper, pausing and releasing the gears with a steady tick-tock, tick-tock. This precise regulation of power was a breathtaking leap in mechanical thinking. Medieval clockmakers were essentially building the first sophisticated feedback control systems, solving problems of energy transfer and motion regulation that would become fundamental to all automated machinery. In many ways, the steady heartbeat of the escapement is the direct ancestor of the oscillating quartz crystal in your wristwatch and the synchronized clock cycles of a computer's processor. We can still witness this mechanical brilliance in action today. The magnificent clock in Salisbury Cathedral, crafted around 1386, is a glorious relic that continues to function over 6 centuries later. Its great foliate balance wheel swings back and forth, its iron gears and pinions engaging with a sound that is both ancient and timeless. It stands as a silent, powerful witness to the skill of its creators, anonymous blacksmiths and carpenters who worked with hand-forged metal and painstaking calculation, achieving a level of precision that feels almost miraculous for their era. Their work demonstrates a masterful understanding of metallurgy, geometry, and physics, all without the formal scientific language we have today. They learned by doing, by experimenting, and by observing the intimate relationship between force and motion. Ultimately, the mechanical clock's legacy is far greater than just telling time. It reorganized human perception, shifting our relationship with time from something we experienced to something we could measure, manage, and even sell. It became the central nervous system of growing cities and the indispensable tool for astronomers and navigators who depended on precise timekeeping to map the heavens and the seas. This medieval invention planted the seed for the entire concept of automation, providing the fundamental principles of gearing and regulated motion that would eventually power the looms of the Industrial Revolution and the robots of our own age. It was the first machine to truly master rhythm, and in doing so, it gave society a new pulse. Now, consider the silent revolution that began not in a laboratory, but in the bustling workshops of 13th-century Italian glassmakers. Here, artisans who had long perfected the art of crafting beautiful beads and vessels began experimenting with segments of glass or polished quartz, discovering that these curved pieces could magnify text or sharpen the blurry edges of the world for aging eyes. The true breakthrough came when an unknown innovator had the idea to mount 2 of these lenses into a frame that could be balanced on the nose and held before the eyes, a simple yet transformative act that gave birth to the first pair of eyeglasses. This was a democratization of vision itself. Before this moment, a scholar or scribe whose eyesight began to fail in their 40s, a common fate, faced an abrupt end to their career, their world of words and diagrams slowly dissolving into an unreadable haze. With the advent of spectacles, as they were first called, that career could be extended by decades. The cumulative effect on society was enormous. It meant that the most experienced minds, the master craftsmen and the learned scholars, could continue their work with undiminished precision, passing on knowledge and skills for far longer than ever before. The initial design was rudimentary 2 magnifying lenses set into wooden, leather, or horn frames that were either riveted together or designed to pinch the nose. They were a luxury item afforded only by the wealthy and the clergy, but their practical value was so immediately apparent that demand skyrocketed. By the early 14th century, workshops in Venice, a hub for fine glassmaking, were producing spectacles in significant quantities. The craft of lens grinding evolved from a curious trade secret into a sophisticated profession, with artisans learning through trial and error how to shape glass to correct for different types of vision impairment. These early opticians were working without a formal scientific playbook. They understood the effect of their work through practical results, not theoretical physics. They knew that a convex lens, thicker in the middle, could help those with farsightedness, a condition common with age, while concave lenses for nearsightedness would appear later. This hands-on, experimental approach to optics was a remarkable feat of intuitive engineering, solving a human problem with elegant material science long before Snell's law of refraction was formally defined in the 17th century. The impact of this invention rippled far beyond the individual, acting as a powerful catalyst for intellectual and economic progress across Europe. In monasteries, monks tasked with the painstaking manual labor of copying manuscripts could work for more hours each day with less eye strain, accelerating the production and preservation of knowledge. For astronomers like the great Tycho Brahe, precision ground lenses were indispensable for making accurate celestial observations and detailed charts. Mapmakers and navigators could draft and read intricate charts with newfound clarity, directly supporting the era of exploration that was soon to dawn. The very act of reading, once a struggle for many after a certain age, became more accessible, subtly fueling the spread of literacy and the exchange of ideas that would culminate in the Renaissance. Eyeglasses, in essence, became one of the world's first productivity tools, enhancing human capability and extending the prime of a person's intellectual and creative output. Perhaps the most profound legacy of medieval eyeglasses is how they represent a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with its own limitations. For the first time, a common physical ailment of aging was not just accepted as an inevitable decline, but was actively corrected with a technological intervention. This was a quiet but monumental declaration that the human body could be improved upon, that technology could be harnessed to augment our natural abilities. This concept that a device could become a seamless extension of the self is a cornerstone of modern life, from the hearing aid to the smartphone. Those first clumsy frames balanced on a monk's nose were the direct ancestors of the augmented reality glasses being developed today. They were a truly visionary invention, not merely for what they did, but for the paradigm they created, that through ingenuity we can build a clearer, sharper, and more detailed world for ourselves to see and understand. While the mechanical clock was organizing time in the cities and eyeglasses were sharpening the vision of scholars, a much quieter but equally profound revolution was taking place in the muddy fields of rural Europe. The invention of the heavy plow didn't just change how farmers worked the land, it fundamentally reshaped the continent's geography, economy, and destiny. Before its arrival, agriculture in much of northern Europe was a frustrating battle against nature. Farmers relied on the simple ard or scratch plow, a light wooden tool that was fine for the light, sandy soils of the Mediterranean. But in the vast, fertile plains north of the Alps, the soil was a different beast altogether: thick, heavy clay, stubborn and waterlogged, stubbornly resisting the weak scratches of traditional tools. This rich earth, full of potential nutrients, was essentially useless for large-scale farming. It was like having a locked storehouse of food with no key. The heavy plow was that key. Its design was a masterpiece of practical engineering, solving multiple problems at once. Unlike its predecessor, this new plow was a massive, wheeled contraption, often requiring a team of 8 oxen to pull it. The most crucial innovation was the moldboard, a curved metal plate attached behind the cutting coulter and share. As the plow moved forward, this moldboard did something magical. It sliced a deep furrow into the dense earth and then gracefully lifted the sod, turned it over, and shattered it into fine, aerated soil. This single action was transformative, turning the soil buried weeds and crop stubble, creating natural fertilizer, while the deep furrow allowed for crucial drainage in the wet northern climates, preventing root rot. For the first time, the challenging but incredibly fertile clay soils of regions like northern France, Germany, and England could be tamed and made productive. This wasn't just an improvement, it was the opening of a new agricultural frontier. The social and economic consequences of this single tool were staggering. With the ability to farm these new lands effectively, food production skyrocketed. Communities could generate consistent surpluses for the first time, which meant not just insurance against famine, but also the ability to support larger populations and fuel trade. This agricultural boom occurred during the medieval warm period, a centuries-long stretch of unusually mild and stable climate, creating perfect conditions for expansion. More food meant more people. Villages grew into towns, and the population of Europe began a steady climb that would last for centuries. This surplus wealth also freed up labor. Not everyone was needed to work the fields anymore, allowing people to specialize in crafts, trade, and other professions, which in turn stimulated the growth of a more complex, diversified economy and laid the groundwork for the commercial revolution. The heavy plow's influence even etched itself into the very landscape and social structure of rural Europe, because maneuvering the enormous team of oxen required a wide turning radius. Field shapes evolved from the small, square plots of the south to the long, narrow strips characteristic of northern manors. This change in land division influenced patterns of land ownership and community organization for generations. Furthermore, the immense cost of the iron components and the team of oxen needed to pull it was often beyond the means of a single family. This encouraged cooperative farming and reinforced the manorial system where peasants pooled their resources and worked the lord's demesne lands together. In this way, the heavy plow was more than a tool. It was a social organizer, shaping how people lived and worked alongside one another. Its legacy is a powerful testament to how a seemingly humble innovation in agriculture can become the bedrock upon which societies are built and futures are grown. While the heavy plow was unlocking the agricultural potential of the European landscape, another monumental invention was literally reaching for the skies, transforming the very horizon with stone and ambition. The treadwheel crane stands as one of the most iconic and physically impressive machines of the medieval era, a testament to the sheer audacity of its creators. Picture the construction site of a great Gothic cathedral, a scene of organized chaos and deafening noise. Amidst the dust and the din, a massive wooden wheel, often 2 stories tall, rotates slowly against the sky. Inside this enormous wheel, much like a hamster in a cage, a worker walks steadily forward, his steps powering the intricate system of gears, axles, and ropes that lift multi-ton blocks of cut stone hundreds of feet into the air. This was not brute force, it was brute force harnessed by brilliant mechanical intelligence. The sight of these cranes perched on the rising skeletons of cathedrals must have been awe-inspiring, a powerful symbol of human ingenuity, literally building its way closer to the divine. The true genius of the treadwheel crane lies in its elegant application of fundamental physics, specifically the principles of mechanical advantage. The system was a masterpiece of compounded force multiplication. At its heart was a large wooden gear attached to the axle of the great wheel. As the worker walked, turning the wheel, This primary gear engaged with a smaller gear on a separate axle, a setup known as a gear train. This initial step traded distance for force. The worker took many steps to turn the large gear just once, but in doing so, generated significantly more rotational power. This power was then transferred to a heavy-duty winch or drum around which a thick rope was wound. The final element was the pulley system, a series of wheels and ropes mounted on a projecting jib, the crane's arm. By threading the rope through multiple pulleys, what we now call a block and tackle, the builders could multiply the force from the winch yet again. The combined effect was staggering. The steady, manageable effort of 1 or 2 men walking could be transformed into enough lifting power to hoist a stone weighing several tons, guiding it with precision to waiting masons high on the scaffolding. This sophisticated understanding of energy transfer and machinery was not born in a vacuum. It was the product of centuries of accumulated knowledge, often passed down through guilds of carpenters and masons who treated their craft as a closely guarded secret. These master builders were the engineers of their day, and their notebooks, filled with intricate diagrams and sketches, reveal a deep, practical comprehension of concepts like torque, leverage, and structural load that wouldn't be formally defined by scientists like Newton for centuries. They learned through doing, through experimentation, and through the relentless demand to build taller, lighter, and more magnificent structures. The treadwheel crane was their ultimate tool, enabling the construction of the breathtaking Gothic cathedrals that define so many European cityscapes even now. Without this machine, the flying buttresses of Chartres, the spire of Strasbourg, or the vaulted ceilings of Canterbury simply could not have been built. It provided the literal muscle to realize an architectural vision that sought to defy gravity itself. Beyond its immediate practical use, the crane's legacy is a profound one. It represents a crucial stepping stone in the history of automation and machine design. The fundamental principle of using human power to drive a complex geared mechanism is a direct precursor to the machines of the Industrial Revolution. While steam would eventually replace the man in the wheel, the basic idea of converting rotational energy into controlled, powerful linear motion remained unchanged. Furthermore, the existence of these cranes forces us to reconsider the medieval workforce. The individual walking in the wheel, often called a winch donkey, was performing a grueling, repetitive task, but he was also an integral cog in a vast, coordinated project that required incredible skill and timing. His labor, amplified by brilliant engineering, contributed to some of the most enduring artistic and architectural achievements in human history. The treadwheel crane is therefore more than just a historical lifting device. It is a powerful symbol of the medieval world's ability to blend raw human effort with sophisticated intellectual design to create something truly timeless. Yet, even as the treadwheel crane was reshaping the skyline, another revolutionary device was quietly redefining humanity's understanding of the horizon, not on land, but out on the vast and unforgiving expanse of the open ocean. The magnetic compass presented a solution to one of the oldest and most terrifying problems faced by sailors, the complete and utter disorientation that came with overcast skies. For centuries, maritime navigation was a fair-weather endeavor. Under the clear cloak of night, a skilled navigator could chart a course by the fixed North Star, and by day, the sun's arc provided a general sense of east and west. But when clouds rolled in and blotted out the heavens for days on end, the world shrank to a featureless, heaving gray circle. A ship could be sailing in circles for all anyone knew, hopelessly lost until the weather cleared, if it ever did. The compass changed this dynamic entirely. It placed a piece of the immutable cosmos right there in a small box on the captain's deck, a constant, reliable guide whispering the direction of north through storm, fog, and the darkest night. This wasn't just an improvement in navigation. It was the conquest of a fundamental human fear, the fear of being lost at sea. The journey of this technology to European hands is a story of global intellectual exchange that defies the myth of an isolated medieval world. The fundamental principle that a lodestone, a naturally magnetic mineral, could align itself with the Earth's poles was known to Chinese scholars as early as the Han Dynasty, who initially used it for geomancy and land surveying. Through trade routes across the Indian Ocean and cultural contacts, this knowledge filtered into the Islamic world, where scholars and navigators further refined it. By the 12th century, Mediterranean sailors, particularly from the maritime powerhouses of Amalfi and Genoa, began to adapt these designs. Their crucial innovation was practical and elegant. They mounted a magnetized iron needle on a pivot, often placing it inside a protective box or affixing it to a card marked with the cardinal directions. This portable, sturdy design was perfectly suited to the violent motions of a ship at sea, transforming an intriguing scientific curiosity into an indispensable piece of nautical equipment. This cross-continental evolution of the compass is a powerful reminder that medieval innovation was often a collaborative, international effort, with ideas flowing and improving as they moved between cultures. The impact of this reliable guidance system was nothing short of revolutionary for trade and exploration. Before the compass, shipping was largely confined to cautious coast-hugging voyages, a practice known as cabotage. Sailors were reluctant to venture out of sight of land for long, making trans-Mediterranean or North Sea journeys risky and slow. With the compass, captains could now plot straight-line courses across open water with newfound confidence. This dramatically reduced voyage times, increased the number of trading trips a merchant vessel could make in a season, and opened up direct routes between distant ports. The Mediterranean trade networks flourished, and northern European powers like the Hanseatic League expanded their reach. This surge in maritime commerce didn't just exchange goods like silk, spices, and wool. It circulated ideas, technologies, and cultural influences, weaving a tighter web of connection across the known world. The compass effectively shrank the oceans, setting the economic and logistical stage for the daring voyages of the age of exploration that would soon follow. Beyond its immediate practical use, the compass represents a profound philosophical shift in humanity's relationship with the natural world. Medieval sailors, often perceived as superstitious, were in fact employing a tool based on a fundamental, invisible force of physics. They didn't need to understand the complex science of geomagnetism. They simply observed and trusted its consistent effect. In doing so, they were harnessing an abstract natural law for intensely practical application, a cornerstone of the scientific method. This act of relying on an unseen force to guide them was a leap of faith in rational principles, demonstrating an empirical approach to problem solving. The compass, therefore, is more than a navigational aid. It is a symbol of the dawning age of applied science, where observation of nature's patterns could be leveraged to expand human capability and ambition. It foreshadowed the work of later scientists like William Gilbert, who would formally study magnetism, and it remains the foundational principle behind every modern guidance system, from the simple dial in a car to the intricate magnetometers in smartphones and spacecraft. The medieval mariner's compass was the first tool that allowed humanity to truly feel the pull of the planet itself, and in doing so, it gave us the confidence to navigate our way into the modern era. While the compass was guiding ships across uncharted waters, a much simpler yet equally vital innovation was taking root on solid ground, literally at the feet of the medieval world's most indispensable engine, the horse. It's easy to overlook the humble horseshoe, a curved piece of forged iron, but its adoption across Europe from about the 9th century onward was a quiet revolution in mobility and power. Before its widespread use, the working life of a horse was often brutal and short. A horse's hoof, while remarkably tough, is still made of keratin, the same protein as our fingernails. On long journeys over rough, stony tracks, or when pulling a heavy plow through dense, unforgiving soil, these hooves would wear down, crack, and split. A lame horse was not just an inconvenience, it was an economic disaster. This animal was the tractor, the truck, and the all-terrain vehicle of the Middle Ages, central to farming, trade, transportation, and warfare. Protecting its feet was therefore not a matter of simple animal welfare, but one of profound economic and strategic necessity. The design of the medieval horseshoe was a masterpiece of practical problem-solving. Blacksmiths would heat a flat bar of iron in a forge until it was pliable, then skillfully hammer it into that now iconic U shape over an anvil. The critical step was the addition of nail holes punched along the outer edge. The shoes were then fitted hot against the horse's trimmed hoof. The slight sizzle and smell of burning keratin ensured a perfect, snug fit as the metal cooled and contracted. Using specialized, blunt-ended nails, the smith would then secure the shoe, driving the nails in at an angle so they emerged through the top of the insensitive hoof wall, where they could be clenched over and filed smooth. This process required a deep understanding of equine anatomy and blacksmithing metallurgy to create a shoe that was both secure and, crucially, did not injure the sensitive inner structures of the foot. This was far more advanced than simply strapping on a piece of metal. It was a precise, surgical-like application of technology to a living creature. The consequences of this simple innovation rippled through every facet of medieval society. With protected hooves, horses could work longer hours and travel vastly greater distances without going lame. This directly supercharged the efficiency of agriculture, as a single team of horses could plow more acreage in a season. It revolutionized land transport, enabling merchants to move heavier loads of goods over longer stretches of poor-quality Roman roads and muddy tracks, which in turn stimulated trade networks and the flow of commerce between towns and regions. Perhaps most dramatically, the horseshoe changed the face of warfare. A knight's destrier or warhorse shod with iron gained tremendous advantages in traction and stamina on the battlefield. It could charge with more stability and pursue a fleeing enemy for longer distances without its rider having to worry about the animal becoming incapacitated by damaged hooves. This enhanced mobility for cavalry units could often mean the difference between victory and defeat in a military campaign. Beyond its immediate practical benefits, the horseshoe stands as a powerful symbol of the medieval mindset, identifying a pervasive, everyday problem and applying available technology to solve it with elegant efficiency. It represents an early and sophisticated form of preventive maintenance, recognizing that protecting a key asset was far more cost-effective than constantly replacing it. This principle of extending functional life through clever design is a cornerstone of modern engineering and logistics. Furthermore, the craft of farriery, the specialized trade of shoeing horses, blended blacksmithing with basic veterinary science, creating a new profession built on skilled, hands-on knowledge. In protecting the horse, this unassuming invention protected the very mobility that bound the medieval world together, proving that a society's progress can often be measured by the care it takes of the foundations upon which it is built. Now shift your perspective from the grand scale of cathedral construction and open seas to the intimate, backbreaking labor of the medieval worksite. Here, amidst piles of stone, earth, and harvested crops, the most transformative innovation was often one of elegant simplicity. the wheelbarrow, a device so perfectly balanced and intuitive that it feels almost obvious, was anything but. Its arrival in Europe around the 12th century represents a quiet yet monumental leap in ergonomic thinking, a tool that effectively gave a single worker the strength of two. Before its adoption, moving heavy, bulky materials was a task that demanded multiple laborers or the use of cumbersome sledges and drag sheets, processes that were slow, inefficient, and exhausting. The wheelbarrow changed this dynamic entirely by placing a single wheel at the front of a load-bearing tray or box. It ingeniously transferred the majority of the weight from the worker's arms and back onto the axle. The person pushing it was no longer merely carrying the load, they were now guiding it with the wheel bearing the brunt of the strain. This fundamental shift turned a task of pure muscle into one of balanced control, dramatically reducing fatigue and increasing the amount of work that could be accomplished in a day. The sheer versatility of this simple machine made it an indispensable asset across the entire medieval economy. On a bustling monastic farm during harvest, a single worker could now wheel a heavy load of grain from the fields to the granary, a task that previously would have required two people carrying a litter between them. This efficiency meant more food could be gathered and stored faster, securing the community against spoilage and bad weather. At a castle construction site, masons relied on wheelbarrows to move mortar and smaller stones to where the builders were working high on the walls, keeping the pace of construction flowing smoothly without requiring complex lifting mechanisms for every single item. In the dark, cramped tunnels of a mine, the wheelbarrow was perhaps even more revolutionary. Miners could load ore directly into its container and wheel it out along narrow tracks, vastly increasing the volume of material they could extract compared to carrying it out in baskets on their backs. In each of these scenarios, the wheelbarrow acted as a force multiplier, amplifying human effort and directly contributing to greater productivity, larger surpluses, and accelerated building projects. Beneath its straightforward wooden and iron construction lay a profound, if intuitive, understanding of physics that wouldn't be formally articulated until the work of Renaissance scientists like Leonardo da Vinci and later Isaac Newton. The design of the wheelbarrow is a masterclass in the principles of leverage and weight distribution. The wheel acts as the fulcrum, the pivot point of a lever. The load in the tray is placed between this fulcrum and the hands of the person lifting the handles. This configuration creates a second-class lever, the same principle at work when you use a nutcracker or a bottle opener. In this system, the effort required to lift the load is significantly less than the weight of the load itself. The operator only needs to provide enough upward force to balance the load, while the forward motion is provided by pushing. This efficient mechanical advantage meant that a worker could move hundreds of pounds of material with a fraction of the energy they would have expended carrying it. Medieval carpenters and blacksmiths, through practical experimentation and craft tradition, had engineered a solution that perfectly optimized human biomechanics for the task at hand. The enduring legacy of the medieval wheelbarrow is a powerful testament to the idea that the most impactful inventions are not always the most complex. It didn't require the intricate gear systems of a clock or the advanced metallurgy of a blast furnace. It required a brilliant insight into how to work smarter, not harder. Its widespread adoption underscores a growing focus in the Middle Ages on ergonomics and labor-saving devices, a shift that recognized the value of the individual worker's well-being and efficiency. This humble tool became a universal symbol of manual labor and practical progress, its basic design remaining virtually unchanged for centuries because it achieved a state of near-perfect functional purity. From those medieval sites to modern-day gardens and construction projects, the wheelbarrow remains a constant, a simple yet perfect marriage of wheel and container that forever changed the weight of the world for the person charged with moving it. But while the wheelbarrow was making light work of heavy loads on the surface, a far more intense and transformative revolution was taking place deep within the earth and in the blazing heart of medieval industry. The development of the blast furnace in the 12th century represents a quantum leap in humanity's ability to harness one of nature's most fundamental elements, fire. Before this innovation, iron production was a slow, laborious, and frustratingly limited process. Early smelters used what were known as bloomery furnaces, essentially clay chimneys where ore was heated with charcoal. The result was a spongy, impure mass of iron called a bloom, which then had to be removed and beaten with hammers for hours to squeeze out the slag, yielding a small amount of wrought iron. It was an artisanal, small-scale craft, capable of producing fine weapons for a select few, but utterly incapable of supplying the sheer volume of metal needed for a growing society. The blast furnace changed everything by turning this delicate art into a powerful, continuous industrial process. The genius of the blast furnace lay in its two key innovations working in concert. The first was its sheer size and shape. These structures were often towering stone or brick edifices, much larger than earlier forges. This larger internal volume allowed for a bigger charge of iron ore and charcoal to be loaded at once. But size alone wasn't enough. The true breakthrough was the second element, the powerful bellows. Driven by water wheels, these mechanical bellows did not merely blow air into the furnace. They forced a continuous, powerful stream or blast of oxygen into the heart of the fire. This constant, high-pressure airflow dramatically intensified the combustion, sending temperatures soaring to levels previously unattainable, well over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At this incredible heat, a miraculous transformation occurred. The iron ore didn't just soften, it completely melted, liquefying and separating from the rocky impurities in the ore. This molten iron, being heavier, would trickle down to the bottom of the furnace, where it could be tapped off and channeled into waiting sand molds. For the first time in history, metalworkers could produce large quantities of liquid iron, ready to be cast into any shape they desired. The immediate impact of this new ability to cast iron was nothing short of revolutionary. Suddenly, complex and heavy objects could be produced in a single, seamless piece, rather than being painstakingly forged and welded together from smaller bits of wrought iron. This led to an explosion of new products and applications. For farmers, cast iron meant more durable and effective plowshares and tools that could be produced in greater numbers, boosting agricultural efficiency. For builders, it meant the ability to create massive structural components like iron reinforcements for the soaring vaults of Gothic cathedrals or sturdy pillars for grand civic buildings. In the home, it brought about sturdy cooking pots and cauldrons that were far more affordable and longer lasting than their ceramic or bronze counterparts. And of course, for warfare, it enabled the mass production of armor plates, cannon barrels, and other military hardware on a scale that began to change the very nature of conflict. The blast furnace didn't just make more iron. It democratized it, transforming a precious commodity into a ubiquitous material that began to reinforce the very skeleton of medieval society. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the medieval blast furnace is how it serves as the direct technological ancestor to the entire modern steel and iron industry. The basic operating principle, using a forced air blast to superheat a charge of ore and fuel inside a tall refractory stack, remains virtually unchanged in today's massive industrial facilities. Those 12th century furnace masters, often monks in places like the Cistercian order known for their metallurgical skills, were the pioneers of large-scale thermodynamic engineering. They were mastering the complex chemistry of combustion and reduction without the formal language of modern science, learning through meticulous observation how the quality of ore, the type of charcoal, and the precise force of the blast would affect the quality of the iron produced. This hands-on mastery over materials and extreme heat laid the entire groundwork for the Industrial Revolution centuries later. The steam engine that would power that revolution required precisely cast iron cylinders and components that only a descendant of the blast furnace could provide. This invention, therefore, represents a crucial link in the chain of progress, a moment when medieval ingenuity stoked the fires that would eventually warm the entire modern world. While the blast furnace was mastering the manipulation of metal on an industrial scale, a more personal and intimate transformation was occurring on the very faces of medieval society. The evolution from the simple riveted magnifying lenses of the 13th century to the sophisticated spectacle frame of the 14th represents a quiet revolution in design thinking, shifting the focus from pure function to user experience. Those early prototypes, known as rivet spectacles, were effective but profoundly uncomfortable. They consisted of two lenses connected by a central rivet that simply pinched the bridge of the nose with no arms to secure them. Wearing them was a constant balancing act. A scholar deep in thought might gesture emphatically and send their precious glasses clattering to the floor, while an artisan bending over their work would find them sliding off entirely. The introduction of hinged side arms or temples that curved gracefully over the ears was a stroke of ergonomic genius. This single innovation transformed eyeglasses from a cumbersome tool that had to be constantly held or adjusted into a stable, hands-free device that became a seamless extension of the wearer. For the first time, someone could forget they were even wearing them, allowing for uninterrupted hours of reading, writing, or detailed craftsmanship. This newfound comfort had a profound and immediate impact on productivity and the preservation of knowledge. Imagine an elderly monk, his eyesight failing after a lifetime of painstakingly copying sacred texts in a dimly lit scriptorium. With rivet spectacles, his work would be punctuated by constant interruptions to reposition his slipping lenses. But with the stable, ear-mounted frames, he could work for hours with his head bent low, his hands free to expertly guide his quill across the parchment without breaking concentration. This extended the productive lifespan of scribes, scholars, and master craftsmen by years, even decades. The cumulative effect on culture and technology was immense. More books could be copied and preserved, complex architectural plans could be drafted with greater precision, and the intricate work of goldsmiths and instrument makers reached new heights of accuracy. The spectacle frame effectively gave society a vast reservoir of experienced talent, more time to mentor the next generation, creating a continuous chain of knowledge transfer that might otherwise have been broken by the inevitable decline of age-related vision. Beyond mere practicality, the design of these early frames reveals a surprisingly modern understanding of personalization and even fashion. Artisans began crafting frames from a variety of materials to suit different tastes and budgets, from humble wood and leather for the common scribe to polished bone, horn, and even precious metals for the wealthy and powerful. The frames themselves became a canvas for craftsmanship with decorative carving and tooling. This shift is crucial. It marks the moment when eyeglasses began their journey from a purely medical device to a personal accessory, an object that spoke to the identity and status of the wearer. This medieval innovation prefigured our entire modern concept of wearable technology, where the design and comfort of a device are just as important as its function. It recognized that for technology to be truly adopted into daily life, it must not only work well but also feel good and look appropriate to the user. Ultimately, the spectacle frame stands as a powerful symbol of the democratization of knowledge itself. By making vision correction stable, comfortable, and increasingly accessible, it broke down a significant barrier to education and skilled labor. It allowed for the sharpening of minds well into old age, fostering an environment where intellectual and artistic pursuits were no longer necessarily cut short by the physical limitations of the body. This seemingly simple invention, a pair of arms hinged to a frame, was a profound declaration that everyone, from the poorest student to the most revered master, deserved the right to see the world clearly and to contribute to its understanding for as long as they were able. It was a commitment to a brighter, clearer future, built one comfortable, well-designed pair of glasses at a time. Now, imagine the landscape of 12th century Europe beginning to change, not just with castles and cathedrals, but with a new kind of structure that reached not for the heavens, but for the very wind itself. The vertical windmill emerged as a towering testament to medieval ingenuity, a machine that captured an invisible, capricious force of nature and put it to work for the community. Before its arrival, the grinding of grain, the essential process of turning hard wheat into life-sustaining flour, was a back-breaking chore. It was done by hand using small quern stones or, for the wealthy, by animals plodding in circles to turn larger millstones. Both methods were painfully slow, limited in scale, and tied to the availability and cost of animal or human labor. The windmill shattered these limitations. By harnessing the boundless free energy of the wind, it unlocked a level of mechanical power previously unimaginable, transforming not just how flour was made, but the very economic potential of the regions where it took root. The true brilliance of the medieval windmill lies in its remarkably sophisticated design, a masterclass in applied physics crafted from wood and stone. At its heart was a massive horizontal axle to which were attached 4 long, cloth-covered sails. This entire assembly was mounted atop a sturdy tower, placing it high into the path of the prevailing winds. But the most ingenious feature was the ability of the entire cap, the roof section holding the axle and sails, to rotate. Through a simple yet effective tail pole extending down to the ground, the miller could physically turn the cap, orienting the sails to face directly into the wind, no matter which direction it blew from. This capability to actively seek out the wind, to adjust to its whims, demonstrates a profound and intuitive understanding of aerodynamics. The medieval carpenters who built these structures knew through observation and experience that the angle of the sail to the wind was critical for capturing maximum energy. They were optimizing for efficiency centuries before the science of fluid dynamics would provide the mathematical formulas to explain why their designs worked so well. This captured wind power was then transferred through a complex internal symphony of gears. The rotating sails turned the horizontal axle, which engaged with a massive vertical gear known as a wallower. This transferred the power down through the structure to turn the runner stone, the heavy upper millstone that rotated against a stationary bedstone below. The grain fed between these stones was ground into flour by this relentless, wind-powered motion. The gearing was crucial. It not only transferred power but could also be designed to increase the rotational speed, allowing the slowly turning sails to spin the millstone at a much faster rate suitable for efficient grinding. This intricate system of shafts, gears, and stones represents one of the most advanced mechanical assemblies of the pre-industrial world, a precursor to the complex gear trains that would later drive factories and machinery. The impact of the windmill extended far beyond the mere production of flour. These structures quickly became the economic engines of their communities, central hubs of productivity that supported a wide range of industries. In the low-lying regions of the Netherlands, windmills were adapted with Archimedes screws or paddle wheels to become powerful water pumps, tirelessly draining wetlands and reclaiming land from the sea, literally expanding the territory of a nation. Later, sawmills powered by wind began to appear, using the same principles to convert rotary motion into the back and forth action needed to saw massive logs into planks with a speed and consistency human sawyers could never match. This revolutionized shipbuilding and construction, providing ample timber for the growing maritime powers of Northern Europe. A village with a windmill was a village with a powerful economic advantage, attracting trade, supporting a larger population, and fostering local self-sufficiency. The miller became a key figure in the community, and the constant, rhythmic sound of the turning sails and grinding stones became the soundtrack of progress and prosperity. In many ways, the medieval vertical windmill stands as a powerful and poignant symbol of sustainable technology, a leap in renewable energy use that feels strikingly modern. Long before concerns about fossil fuels or energy independence, medieval societies were building an infrastructure powered entirely by a clean, replenishable resource. They understood the value of leveraging natural forces without depleting them, of working with the environment rather than simply extracting from it. These iconic structures dotting the hillsides and plains represent a moment in history where human ambition and environmental harmony were not at odds but in concert. They anticipated the core principle of modern wind turbines that now generate electricity for our cities, proving that the desire to harness the wind is a timeless pursuit. The windmill was more than just a machine. It was a declaration of independence from the limitations of muscle power, a bold statement that humanity could look to the elements themselves to build a more productive and prosperous future. Yet, even as the windmill was harnessing nature's power for peaceful industry, another medieval innovation was channeling mechanical genius into a device that would fundamentally reshape the very nature of conflict and power. The crossbow, though its basic concept was ancient, underwent a profound transformation in the 11th century, emerging as a weapon of such terrifying efficiency that it was once condemned by the Church as hateful to God. This was not the simple wooden bow of a hunter. This was a machine, a masterpiece of leverage and stored energy designed for one brutal purpose: to pierce the finest armor from 100 yards away. Its power came from its unique horizontal bow mounted on a stock, but its true revolutionary heart lay in its two key components. The first was the trigger mechanism, a simple yet flawless piece of precision engineering often made of durable antler or iron. This nut, as it was called, held the drawn string under immense tension until the moment the shooter squeezed the lever, releasing that pent-up energy with lethal consistency. This mechanism made the crossbow the direct mechanical ancestor of every firearm that would follow, introducing the concept of a controlled, aimed release of power at the pull of a trigger. The second component was just as crucial: the spanning device. Drawing the heavy string of a military-grade crossbow required far more strength than a human arm could provide. Medieval engineers solved this with a suite of ingenious tools. A soldier might use a belt hook to lean into the draw, or a claw-like goat's foot lever. For the most powerful models, they employed a crank and pulley system called a cranequin, or a massive lever called a windlass. These were not mere accessories. They were integral to the weapon's function, mechanical multipliers that allowed a single man to harness forces equivalent to over 1,000 pounds of draw weight. This process of spanning transformed the act of archery from one of sustained muscular strength to one of mechanical advantage. A crossbowman could lock his weapon, store that incredible energy, and then hold it ready for minutes or even hours, waiting for the perfect shot without a single muscle trembling from fatigue. This ability to store energy and release it on demand was a conceptual leap that echoed the principles of the clock's escapement, applying the same mechanical thinking to the grim science of war. The social impact of this technological leap was nothing short of seismic. For centuries, the battlefield had been dominated by the knight, a warrior aristocracy encased in expensive steel, trained from childhood, and representing the pinnacle of martial prowess. The crossbow shattered this monopoly. With minimal training, a common peasant or townsman could learn to aim and fire a crossbow with deadly effect. The weapon did not require a lifetime of practice to build the specific muscles needed for a 6-foot yew longbow. It required only the brief instruction on how to work its mechanical spanning device. This democratization of lethal force was deeply unsettling to the established feudal order. A low-born soldier, safe behind a pavise shield, could now calmly take aim and bring down a noble knight whose social status and combat training were rendered irrelevant by a well-placed bolt. This shift began to erode the very foundation of the medieval social contract, where military power and land ownership were inextricably linked to a hereditary warrior class. The crossbow was, in effect, an early argument for meritocracy on the battlefield, where the value of a soldier was measured by his technology rather than his bloodline. Tactically, the crossbow forced a complete rethinking of medieval warfare. Its slow rate of fire, perhaps 2 shots a minute compared to a longbow's 10 or 12, was more than compensated for by its armor-piercing power and its ease of use. Armies could now field large regiments of effective missile troops without needing to recruit from a small pool of highly specialized and highly paid longbowmen. These crossbowmen, often deployed in formations protected by pikemen, could unleash volleys of bolts that could stop a cavalry charge dead in its tracks. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Facing a line of crossbows was to face a wall of weapons that could kill you before you ever got close enough to strike a blow. This encouraged more defensive, fortified styles of warfare and increased the importance of siegecraft as commanders sought to avoid open field battles against such a formidable force. The weapon's influence stretched for centuries, remaining a key feature of European battlefields until it was gradually superseded by the gunpowder muskets whose basic user interface, point a stock and pull a trigger, it had so clearly invented. The crossbow stands as a stark reminder that technology is never neutral. It is a force that can recalibrate the balance of power, challenge social hierarchies, and change the course of history with the simple, mechanical click of a release. While the crossbow was redefining power on the battlefield with its mechanical precision, another device was performing a different kind of calculation, one that mapped not the trajectory of a bolt, but the very path of the heavens themselves. The Astrolabe stands as perhaps the most beautiful and intellectually sophisticated instrument to emerge from the medieval world, a handheld model of the universe crafted in polished brass and etched with breathtaking precision. To hold one was to hold a portable cosmos, a complex analog computer that could answer profound questions about time, space, and place. Its journey to prominence is a powerful story of cultural and scientific exchange. While early versions existed in antiquity, it was medieval Islamic scholars who truly perfected the device, refining its mathematics and artistry to an extraordinary degree. From the vibrant intellectual centers of Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba, this knowledge then traveled into Europe, where by the 12th century, it became an indispensable tool for scholars and navigators alike, a tangible symbol of the era's relentless pursuit of knowledge. Operating an astrolabe was a dance between art and science, requiring its user to be part mathematician, part astronomer, and part artist. The device itself was a stack of finely crafted components. At its base was the mater, a hollow disc marked with a scale of hours and degrees. Inside it rested one or more flat plates, each engraved for a specific latitude with a web of lines representing the local horizon, zenith, and celestial circles. On top of these rotated the Rudder, a complex, star-shaped web of pointers that represented the positions of the brightest fixed stars and the circular path of the ecliptic, the sun's annual journey through the constellations. This entire assembly was crowned by a rule and an alidade, a sighting bar used for taking measurements. To use it, one would suspend the astrolabe by its ring, aim the alidade at a known star or the sun, and read its altitude from the scale. By rotating the Rudder to match this observed position against the plate for the user's latitude, the entire celestial sphere for that moment was literally in their hands. This alignment unlocked a wealth of information, transforming a single observation into a multitude of answers. The practical applications of this intricate star chart were as diverse as they were revolutionary. For an Islamic scholar, the astrolabe could accurately determine the 5 daily prayer times by calculating the sun's position relative to the horizon, a vital function for religious observance. For a farmer or a town planner, it could provide the exact time of sunrise or sunset on any given day, essential for organizing the rhythms of daily life and agricultural work. For a traveler on the Silk Road or a sailor venturing along the coast, it could calculate their latitude by measuring the height of the sun at noon, offering a crucial point of reference on often featureless landscapes and seas. Even astrologers used it to cast horoscopes, mapping the positions of planets for the moment of a person's birth. It was, in every sense, a universal problem-solving tool, a single device that connected the divine, the practical, and the scholarly in a way few other inventions ever have. Behind its beautiful facade lay a terrifying depth of mathematical understanding that was centuries ahead of its time. Creating an astrolabe required a comprehensive grasp of spherical geometry and trigonometry, mathematics that were being pioneered and formalized by the very Islamic scholars who were building these devices. The engraver etching a plate for a specific latitude had to mathematically project the 3-dimensional dome of the night sky onto a 2-dimensional brass disc, a complex feat of cartography that accurately represented the apparent movement of celestial bodies. This work was not based on vague estimation but on precise trigonometric tables and formulas that these cultures had developed and refined. Using an astrolabe effectively meant understanding these underlying principles, turning the user into an active participant in the mathematical modeling of the universe. This hands-on engagement with advanced concepts made the astrolabe not just a tool for finding answers, but a sophisticated teaching device that cultivated a deeply intuitive understanding of astronomy and mathematics. In many ways, the astrolabe is the ultimate symbol of the medieval intellectual spirit, a perfect fusion of artistic craftsmanship and rigorous scientific inquiry. The finest examples are breathtaking works of art, their recesses filigreed into intricate star patterns that resemble the most delicate jewelry, their backs engraved with elaborate scales and decorative motifs. Yet every curve and every line served a precise calculative purpose. This harmonious blend of beauty and function speaks to a worldview that did not separate science from art or technology from philosophy. It was all part of a unified quest to understand and navigate the cosmos. The legacy of the astrolabe is profound. It provided the foundational principles for celestial navigation that would guide the great European voyages of exploration centuries later. It represents humanity's first successful attempt to create a physical computer, a mechanical embodiment of natural law that allowed the human mind to grasp the universe's complexities and, for a moment, hold the turning stars in the palm of its hand. Yet, even as the astrolabe was modeling the cosmos for scholars and sailors, another revolution was quietly taking shape in the workshops of medieval Europe, one that would ultimately democratize knowledge itself. Long before Johannes Gutenberg assembled his famous press in the 15th century, medieval innovators were already laying the groundwork for the information age with a remarkably simple yet powerful technology: woodblock printing. This process bypassed the slow, expensive, and error-prone method of copying texts by hand, offering a way to replicate words and images with stunning speed and consistency. Imagine a skilled carver carefully etching a mirror image of a page, be it a prayer, a picture of a saint, or the design for a playing card, onto the smooth, flat surface of a hardwood block. Every line, every curve, every letter was painstakingly gouged out, leaving the raised areas that would carry the ink. Once carved, this single block could be inked and pressed onto sheet after sheet of paper or cloth, creating dozens, even hundreds of identical copies from one original master. This was replication on an unprecedented scale, a fundamental shift from unique craftsmanship to standardized production that would change how people accessed and shared ideas. The impact of this technology was felt most immediately in the realm of everyday life and popular culture. While hand-copied manuscripts remained the precious domain of the wealthy and the church, woodblock printing brought affordable images and texts to the masses. Colorful religious prints depicting saints and biblical scenes allowed ordinary families to own sacred art for private devotion, bringing spiritual imagery out of the cathedral and into the home. Perhaps more surprisingly, the technology fueled a craze for playing cards, which were produced in vast quantities using precisely carved blocks. These cards were not just for games, they were often beautifully illustrated with allegorical figures, serving as tools for entertainment, education, and even social commentary. This mass production of secular items demonstrates that the drive for accessible information wasn't solely religious. It was also commercial and social, catering to a growing urban population with disposable income and a desire for leisure. The humble playing card, often dismissed as a simple pastime, was in fact one of the first widely distributed products of a nascent print culture, proving there was a hungry market for portable, affordable media. Beyond entertainment, these early printed materials played a crucial role in spreading practical knowledge and fostering a sense of shared identity. Single-page prints, known as broadsides, could quickly disseminate news, official proclamations, or even satirical ballads to a largely illiterate populace through powerful imagery. A dramatic depiction of a battle or a monstrous birth could communicate complex events and ideas instantly, transcending the barrier of written language. For those learning to read, woodblock printed primers and grammars provided a more affordable entry point into literacy than a handwritten book. This gradual increase in access to text and image began to erode the monopoly on knowledge held by the clerical and aristocratic elite. Ideas could now circulate more freely between towns and across regions, carried by merchants and travelers. This exchange helped to standardize languages, spread artistic styles, and create a more connected, culturally aware European society, laying the essential social foundation for the greater revolution in printing that was still to come. The technical ingenuity of medieval block printing should not be underestimated, as it solved numerous challenges that Gutenberg would later refine rather than invent. The carvers developed sophisticated techniques for creating intricate lines and shading on wood, achieving a level of detail that could rival pen and ink drawings. Printers experimented with oil-based inks that adhered well to the wooden block and transferred cleanly to the new, increasingly affordable paper that was becoming available from mills across Europe. The press itself, often a simple screw mechanism adapted from wine or cloth presses, provided the even, firm pressure needed for a clear impression. This entire ecosystem, from paper production to ink formulation to the press, was a medieval innovation. These anonymous craftsmen were the pioneers who worked out the basic mechanics of transferring ink from a raised surface onto a substrate, a principle that remains at the heart of printing today. Their work proved that there was a viable alternative to the scribe's quill, establishing both the technical and commercial proof of concept for a world filled with books. In this way, the woodblock printer's workshop was the true crucible of the information revolution, a space where medieval practicality met a burgeoning hunger for knowledge and connection. It was a testament to the era's innovative spirit, demonstrating that the desire to communicate, to share stories, and to preserve ideas efficiently is a powerful human drive. These block-printed pages, with their sometimes crude but always compelling images and text, were the direct ancestors of the modern newspaper, the poster, and the paperback novel. They began the long process of shifting society from an oral and manuscript culture to a visual and print-based one, setting the stage for the explosive changes that movable type would unleash. This medieval precursor to the printing press didn't just make copies, it made culture mobile, accessible, and participatory, planting the first seeds of the globally connected world we inhabit today. Now, shift your focus from the grand workshops and open seas to the heart of the medieval home, where a seemingly simple architectural innovation was quietly waging a war against the very air people breathed. Before the widespread adoption of the chimney in 12th century Northern Europe, the interior of a common house was a smoky, soot-filled, and dangerous environment. The central hearth, while providing essential warmth and a place to cook, was little more than a fire pit in the middle of the floor, with a simple hole in the roof above to let the smoke escape. This system was hopelessly inefficient. Much of the precious heat vanished through the roof, while a significant portion of the smoke simply billowed back down into the living space, filling the single-room dwelling with a choking, acrid haze. Life inside was a constant struggle against soot that blackened walls, spoiled food, and irritated eyes. The risk of respiratory illness was high, and the threat of a stray spark igniting the dried rushes on the floor was a constant, terrifying companion. The chimney changed this precarious existence by introducing a revolutionary concept, controlled and directed ventilation. The genius of the chimney lay in its elegant application of basic physics, specifically the principle of thermal convection. By enclosing the fire within a stone or brick fireplace and connecting it to a narrow, vertical flue that extended up through the roof, medieval builders created a powerful natural draft. As the fire burned, it heated the air within the flue. This hot air, being less dense, would naturally rise rapidly up the shaft, creating a powerful suction that pulled the smoke and combustion gases from the fire along with it, expelling them safely outside. This continuous upward draw also pulled fresh, oxygen-rich air into the room from cracks around doors and windows, feeding the fire and preventing smoky backdrafts. This was a masterful, passive system that required no moving parts, only a clever understanding of how to harness the behavior of hot air to create a self-sustaining cycle of ventilation. The builders who constructed these early chimneys were the unsung HVAC engineers of their day, intuitively mastering the dynamics of airflow and combustion to make the home a safer, cleaner, and far more comfortable place to live. This single architectural feature triggered a cascade of changes in domestic life and building design that were nothing short of transformative. With smoke now reliably channeled outside, the entire interior layout of a home could be reimagined. It was no longer necessary to have just one large, multipurpose hall. Walls could now be built to create separate, specialized rooms without fear of smoke suffocating the occupants. The upper floors of buildings, previously unusable due to intense heat and smoke, could now be developed into private sleeping chambers and storage spaces. This was the birth of the multi-story house as we know it, allowing for greater privacy, better organization of family life, and a more efficient use of urban space as buildings began to grow upward instead of just outward. The fireplace, often grandly built of stone with a decorated mantel, became the new social and emotional heart of the home, a warm, safe, and clean focal point for family gatherings, storytelling, and daily life, a stark contrast to the hazardous open pit it replaced. The health and societal benefits of this shift were profound and far-reaching. The drastic reduction in constant smoke inhalation led to a significant decrease in chronic respiratory ailments like bronchitis and asthma, improving the overall well-being and life expectancy of the population, especially for the very young and the elderly who spent the most time indoors. The cleaner air also meant cleaner clothes, cleaner food, and a generally more hygienic living environment. Furthermore, the efficient containment of heat within the fireplace meant that less wood was needed to achieve the same level of warmth, reducing the burden of fuel gathering and making winter far more bearable. This efficiency enabled longer hours of indoor activity during the cold, dark winters. Artisans could work at their crafts by the firelight for more hours each day. Children could be educated inside, and the overall quality of domestic life was elevated immeasurably. The chimney, in essence, helped to create the conditions for a richer, more productive, and healthier indoor culture, fundamentally altering the rhythm and comfort of daily existence in a way that continues to define our concept of home to this day. Now consider the profound shift that occurred not on the battlefield or in a scholar's study, but on the very fabric of society itself literally. The humble button, emerging as a functional fastening in 13th century Germany, represents a revolution in micro-engineering that reshaped how people dressed, moved, and even perceived their own bodies. Before its arrival, keeping one's clothes closed was an exercise in frustration and discomfort. People relied on a precarious system of pins, brooches, and a labyrinth of laces and ties that were time-consuming to fasten, prone to coming undone, and could easily pinch the skin or snag on things. The simple act of getting dressed was a chore, and the resulting fit was often loose, baggy, and impractical for anything beyond the most sedentary activities. The innovation of the buttonhole, a slit in the fabric designed to securely anchor a small disc, solved all of this with breathtaking elegance. This pairing created a fastening system that was infinitely adjustable, remarkably secure, and could be opened and closed with a simple, intuitive motion of the fingers. It was a lock and key for clothing, providing a new level of control over one's personal enclosure that had never before been possible. This newfound control over fit sparked nothing less than a sartorial revolution, fundamentally altering the silhouette of European fashion and, by extension, the human form itself. With the security of buttons, tailors and wearers could confidently experiment with garments that followed the contours of the body rather than simply draping over it. This allowed for the development of the tightly fitted coat hardy for men and the close-fitting kirtle and gown for women, styles that emphasized the natural waist, shoulders, and torso. This was a dramatic departure from the loose, flowing robes of earlier periods. The practical benefits were immediate and immense. A laborer or archer could move with greater freedom and flexibility without fear of their tunic gaping open. A rider could stay securely mounted without their cloak flying off. On a more basic level, buttons provided a far superior defense against the cold. A tightly buttoned doublet or gown trapped body heat efficiently and kept out drafts in a way that laced or pinned garments never could, offering a new layer of personal comfort and protection from the elements that improved daily life for everyone from the noble in their castle to the farmer in their field. Yet the button's impact extended far beyond mere utility, quickly becoming a powerful and sophisticated language of social status and personal wealth. In an era where sumptuary laws often dictated what materials different classes could wear, buttons became a loophole and a canvas for extravagant display. For the affluent, buttons were not mere fasteners but miniature works of art, crafted from polished silver, gleaming gold, intricate brass, or even precious gemstones like jet and amber. These were displays of disposable income and access to skilled jewelers and metalworkers. For those of more modest means, buttons made of carved bone, polished wood, or even hardened leather still offered a touch of individuality and pride in one's appearance. The number of buttons on a garment also spoke volumes. A sleeve or doublet lined with dozens of expensive buttons was a clear declaration of wealth, as it signaled not only the cost of the materials but also the hours of skilled labor required to sew them all on. In this way, a person's buttons became a portable gallery of their social standing, a form of wearable wealth that could be admired and understood by everyone they met. The design and manufacture of these early buttons reveal a surprisingly advanced understanding of both mechanics and mass production. Creating a functional button required solving several small but complex problems. The button itself had to be smooth enough to pass through the buttonhole without catching, yet have a pronounced shank or holes on its back to allow for a secure thread attachment that could withstand constant pulling and friction. This attention to the ergonomics of fastening shows a nuanced grasp of mechanical interaction between object and user. Furthermore, the sheer number of buttons needed to adorn a single fashionable outfit, sometimes exceeding several dozen, meant that craftsmen had to develop methods for producing them in series. Workshops began to specialize, using lathes and molds to turn, carve, and polish buttons from wood, bone, and metal, with a consistency that hints at early proto-industrial processes. This demand helped stimulate local economies and specialized trades, creating a network of button makers, sellers, and the tailors who employed them. The humble button, therefore, wasn't just a product of medieval industry. It was a driver of it, fostering specialization and commerce on a surprisingly intricate scale. Ultimately, the legacy of the medieval button is a testament to the idea that the most profound revolutions are often the smallest. This unassuming invention touched nearly every aspect of life, from the practical to the psychological. It gave people greater physical comfort, mobility, and protection. It unlocked new possibilities for artistic expression through fashion, and provided a new vocabulary for communicating status and identity. Its design principles of secure, reversible fastening are so perfect that they have remained essentially unchanged for over 7 centuries, outliving countless other technologies. Every time we fasten a shirt, a coat, or a pair of jeans, we are participating in a ritual invented in the Middle Ages, using a solution so elegant and effective that it has never needed to be replaced. The button is a powerful reminder that genius isn't always measured in towering cathedrals or complex clocks. Sometimes it is found in the smallest details, those tiny innovations that fasten themselves so seamlessly to our daily lives that we forget to notice the profound impact they have had on the way we live. While the button was redefining fashion and the chimney was clearing the air of medieval homes, a far more mysterious and transformative process was unfolding in the dimly lit workshops of alchemists and apothecaries. Here, amidst the glow of furnaces and the gleam of copper, these early scientists were mastering the art of distillation, a technique that would allow them to capture the very essence of matter itself. Their apparatus, a seemingly bizarre assembly of flasks, coils, and tubes known as an alembic, was in reality one of the most sophisticated experimental tools of the age. At its heart was the cucurbit, a rounded flask where the liquid, perhaps wine, herbal-infused water, or rose petals soaked in oil, was gently heated. As the liquid warmed, its most volatile components would vaporize, rising up into the attached capital, a helmet-shaped cap that channeled these vapors into a long, downward-sloping tube called the beak. This tube then snaked through a cooling bath of water or ice, causing the vapors to condense back into a purified liquid, which dripped steadily into a waiting receiving flask. This elegant dance of vaporization and condensation, of turning liquid to gas and back again, was a physical manifestation of a profound intellectual pursuit, the quest to separate the pure from the impure, to extract the hidden spirit trapped within all matter. The driving force behind this intricate work was a blend of mystical philosophy and intensely practical need. Medieval alchemists, often working within monastic orders, were deeply influenced by ancient Greek and Islamic texts that spoke of transforming base metals into gold or discovering the elixir of life. While their ultimate goals were shrouded in symbolism, the processes they developed were grounded in meticulous, repeatable experimentation. They were the first true laboratory technicians, carefully observing how different substances behaved when heated, recording temperatures, and noting the precise qualities of the distilled products. This rigorous empirical approach, pursued in the name of spiritual transformation, inadvertently gave birth to the foundational principles of modern chemistry. They were exploring the concept of boiling points long before the term existed, intuitively understanding that different components within a mixture would turn to vapor at different temperatures, allowing for their separation. This methodical process of breaking down complex mixtures into their constituent parts is the absolute bedrock of chemical analysis, and it was being perfected on medieval workbenches centuries before the birth of modern science. The tangible outcomes of this work revolutionized both medicine and daily life. In the apothecary's shop, distillation became a powerful new tool for creating medicines of unprecedented potency and purity. By distilling wine, they produced aqua vitae, the water of life, a strong alcohol that served as a remarkably effective solvent. Herbs, roots, and minerals could be steeped in this alcohol to create powerful tinctures that extracted and preserved their active medicinal compounds far more effectively than simple water-based brews or crushed powders. These concentrated elixirs could be precisely dosed and stored for long periods, representing a major leap forward in pharmacology and patient care. Beyond the healing arts, the same technology was used to capture the delicate fragrances of flowers like roses and lavender, creating the first essential oils and perfumes. These precious concentrates became highly sought-after luxuries, used for personal adornment in religious ceremonies and to mask the less pleasant aromas of medieval urban life. The distiller's art thus catered to both the body and the spirit, producing both medicine for illness and balm for the soul. Perhaps the most enduring and socially significant product of medieval distillation was the creation of distilled spirits as we know them today. What began as a medicinal curiosity quickly evolved into a major economic and cultural force. Monasteries across Europe, particularly those of the Benedictine and Carthusian orders, became renowned centers for producing sophisticated liqueurs and brandies, refining their recipes over generations. These spirits were valued not only for their medicinal properties but also for their ability to preserve seasonal abundance. Fruit that would otherwise rot could be transformed into stable, high-value brandy. This provided a crucial source of income for religious houses and stimulated local agriculture. The technology spread to secular workshops, and the production of spirits like gin, whiskey, and vodka began to take root across the continent. This marked the beginning of an entire industry, one that would shape trade, taxation, and social customs for centuries to come. The medieval distiller, in seeking the essence of wine, had unwittingly given the world a new form of social lubricant, celebration, and commerce. The legacy of the medieval distillation apparatus is therefore immense, stretching far beyond the confines of the alchemist's laboratory. It represents a monumental leap in experimental methodology, providing the first real tools for manipulating and analyzing matter in a controlled, repeatable way. The alembic was, in effect, the prototype for the entire modern chemical industry. Its basic principle of separation by boiling point still used today in everything from petroleum refining to the production of pure pharmaceuticals and alcoholic beverages. Those medieval thinkers, with their furnaces and coiled copper tubes, were pioneering the very concept of process engineering. They demonstrated that through the careful application of heat and cooling, humanity could not just observe nature but actively intervene in its processes, unlocking hidden properties and creating entirely new substances. This shift from passive observation to active transformation is the fundamental thread that connects the mystical experiments of the 12th century to the vast scientific and industrial capabilities of the modern world, making the distillation apparatus a true crucible of chemical innovation. Yet, even as the alchemist still was capturing the essence of liquids, another revolution was unfolding that would literally weave the fabric of medieval society itself. The horizontal loom, emerging by the 11th century, transformed the ancient craft of weaving from a slow, painstaking hand process into a mechanized operation of breathtaking speed and complexity. Before its adoption, weaving was typically done on a vertical loom where the warp threads hung straight down from a beam. The weaver had to manually lift each set of warp threads with one hand to create the shed, the space through which the shuttle carrying the weft thread would pass, and then use the other hand to throw the shuttle through before beating the new thread into place. This was an incredibly slow and physically limiting process, restricting the width of the cloth to the reach of the weaver's arms and making complex patterns a laborious nightmare of manual thread selection. The horizontal loom shattered these constraints by introducing a system of foot-powered mechanization that freed the weaver's hands and dramatically accelerated every step of the process. The true mechanical genius of this device lay in its ingenious use of foot pedals called treadles, connected to a system of heddles. Heddles are cords or wires with a central eye through which each individual warp thread is passed. Multiple sets of these heddles are connected to different treadles. When the weaver pressed down on a treadle with their foot, it would lower one entire set of warp threads while simultaneously raising another set, automatically creating a clear, wide shed. This simple foot motion meant both of the weaver's hands were now completely free. One hand could swiftly throw the shuttle loaded with weft thread through the open shed in a single, fluid motion, while the other hand was ready to catch it on the other side. Then, with a powerful pull on the batten, a swinging frame that held the reed, the newly passed thread could be beaten firmly and evenly into the body of the cloth. This coordination of feet and hands created a rhythmic, efficient workflow that felt more like playing a complex musical instrument than performing manual labor, multiplying the weaver's output several times over. This leap in efficiency had a transformative impact on the medieval economy and social structure. The dramatic increase in production speed and cloth width meant that weaving could move beyond a small-scale household craft for personal use and become a centralized professional industry. Specialized weaving workshops began to appear in towns, particularly in regions like Flanders and northern Italy, which would become famed for their cloth. These workshops could produce vast quantities of high-quality, standardized fabric for export, turning textiles into one of the most important commodities of medieval trade. The demand for raw materials, wool from England, flax for linen, and later cotton fueled international commerce and created intricate economic networks across Europe. The wealth generated from this trade financed the growth of powerful merchant guilds and helped fund the rise of magnificent medieval cities, whose prosperity was quite literally woven from the output of these revolutionary looms. Beyond mere quantity, the horizontal loom unlocked a new world of artistic possibility in textile design. The system of multiple treadles and heddle frames allowed weavers to control individual groups of warp threads with precision, enabling the creation of intricate patterns like twills, herringbones, and even elaborate figurative scenes directly into the fabric. Complex designs that would have been prohibitively time-consuming on a vertical loom could now be produced with relative ease by memorizing a sequence of treadle movements. This gave rise to distinct regional styles and highly sought-after specialty fabrics, which became markers of status and wealth. The famed tapestries of the Middle Ages, which adorned the cold stone walls of castles and cathedrals with vibrant scenes of history, myth, and religion, were made possible by this technology. The loom became a machine for storytelling, its rhythmic clatter giving form to both the practical cloth that clothed populations and the magnificent artworks that defined a culture's aesthetic identity. The legacy of the medieval horizontal loom is found in the very heart of the Industrial Revolution that would follow centuries later. The basic principles it established, using foot-powered treadles to control heddles and free the hands for shuttle operation, remained the standard for handloom weaving for over 700 years. When inventors like Edmund Cartwright developed the first power looms in the 18th century, they were not starting from scratch. They were mechanizing the core concepts of the medieval horizontal loom, replacing human feet with steam-powered actuators. The organizational model of the specialized urban weaving workshop also directly prefigured the factory system. In this way, the horizontal loom was more than just a tool. It was a crucial proto-industrial machine that established the technical, economic, and social patterns for mass production, setting the stage for the world of industry that was to come. But for all the power of the loom to weave the fabric of society, it was another innovation that would carry those fabrics and countless other treasures across the vast and unforgiving expanse of the open ocean. The transition from the steering oar to the stern-mounted rudder represents one of the most critical yet understated evolutions in maritime history, a shift that fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with the sea. Before its widespread adoption in the 12th century, European ships were guided by a hefty steering oar, or sometimes a pair of them mounted on the side of the vessel's stern. This was a system steeped in antiquity, used by the Vikings on their longships and the Romans on their galleys. While effective enough for coastal navigation and the calm waters of the Mediterranean, the steering oar had profound limitations. It was a brute force instrument, requiring immense physical strength from the helmsman to manipulate, especially in rough weather when waves would violently slam against the broad paddle-like blade. Its off-center mounting also created drag, making the ship inherently less efficient and stable, and it was vulnerable to damage from waves or in the chaos of a storm, potentially leaving a ship helplessly adrift. The stern-mounted rudder solved these problems not with complexity, but with a breathtakingly elegant and centralized design. The genius of this new rudder lay in its integration with the hull itself. It was no longer a separate oar lashed to the side, but a permanent, vertical wooden blade attached to the sternpost, the central backbone of the ship's rear. This blade was connected to the helmsman via a pivotal invention, the tiller. A horizontal bar fitted into the top of the rudder stock allowed the helmsman, standing safely within the ship's hull, to pivot the entire rudder blade left or right with a simple, leveraged movement of the tiller. This was a dramatic reduction in effort. A subtle push or pull on the tiller could now translate into a significant directional change for the entire vessel. The central mounting was the true key to its superiority. By placing the rudder directly in the water flow generated by the ship's own movement, it exploited hydrodynamic principles that wouldn't be formally understood for centuries. As water rushed past the hull, the angled rudder blade would create higher pressure on one side and lower pressure on the other, literally pulling the stern around and turning the ship with a smooth, precise, and powerful efficiency that the old steering oar could never hope to match. This gave captains unprecedented control, allowing them to hold a steady course in a crosswind, perform tighter maneuvers in confined harbors, and confidently weather violent storms knowing they had a responsive and robust system guiding them. This newfound control and stability directly enabled the design and construction of a new generation of ships that were larger, heavier, and far more capable than anything that had come before. The cog, a workhorse of Hanseatic trade, and its successor, the mighty carrack, could not have existed without the stern rudder. Their high, rounded hulls were designed to carry massive cargoes of wool, timber, wine, and grain across the North Sea and the Baltic. A steering oar would have been utterly inadequate for managing such bulky, top-heavy vessels in the fierce gales of the northern Atlantic. The central rudder, integrated into a stronger stern post, provided the necessary authority to handle these floating warehouses. This capacity for larger ships was the catalyst for an explosion in the scale and scope of maritime trade. Merchants could now transport goods in volumes that made long-distance voyages economically viable, weaving a dense web of commercial routes that connected the economies of northern and southern Europe. Port cities like Bruges, Lübeck, and Venice grew fabulously wealthy as hubs of this new maritime network, their fortunes literally riding on the stability provided by that pivotal piece of mounted wood at the stern of every incoming ship. The ultimate testament to the rudder's transformative power is its indispensable role in the age of discovery. The iconic caravels and naus that sailed into the unknown under captains like Columbus and da Gama were all equipped with stern-mounted rudders. Consider the challenge they faced, venturing for weeks out of sight of any land, battling unpredictable currents and winds across entire oceans. Holding a precise compass course for such durations would have been impossible with the drag and inconsistency of a steering oar. The rudder provided the reliable, fine-tuned control necessary for celestial navigation, allowing navigators to confidently chart their position based on the stars, knowing their vessel would respond faithfully to the helm. It was this combination of navigational tools like the compass and the Astrolabe with the robust control of the stern rudder that shrank the world's oceans from impenetrable barriers into highways of exploration. This single innovation, born from the practical needs of medieval mariners, didn't just improve steering, it provided the literal directional control that made global exploration possible, setting the bow of history on a course toward an interconnected world. Yet even as the stern-mounted rudder was granting sailors mastery over the oceans, medieval architects were achieving an equally breathtaking feat of control over an entirely different element, stone itself. The flying buttress stands as one of the most audacious and visually striking innovations in the history of construction, a bold exoskeleton of arched stone that allowed buildings to defy gravity and reach for the heavens. To understand its revolutionary impact, one must first picture the architectural challenge it solved. Earlier Romanesque churches were characterized by their massive, fortress-like walls, necessary to support the immense downward and outward thrust of heavy stone vaults. These thick walls, while strong, created dark, cavernous interiors with only small, narrow windows for fear of compromising the structure's integrity. The Gothic vision, however, was one of transcendent light and soaring height, a desire to create a heavenly Jerusalem on earth, filled with the luminous glow of stained glass. The flying buttress was the key that unlocked this vision, a brilliant structural solution that turned solid walls into delicate cages of light. The engineering principle behind the flying buttress is a masterpiece of redirected force. Imagine the roof of a vast cathedral, a network of stone ribs forming a vault. This vault doesn't just push straight down, it also generates a powerful sideways thrust, pushing the walls outward. Without intervention, these walls would simply buckle and collapse under the strain. The flying buttress acts as a strategic counterweight. It is essentially a half-arch that leaps like a stone ribbon from a massive, free-standing pier outside the building to connect with the cathedral's upper wall at the precise point where the vault's thrust is greatest. This ingenious arrangement channels that dangerous outward push down through the external pier and safely into the ground. By externalizing this support system, the building's interior walls were liberated from their load-bearing burden. They no longer needed to be thick and heavy. They could become skeletal frameworks of stone tracery filled with vast, magnificent windows. The wall was transformed from a solid barrier into a delicate membrane of glass and light, all because the flying buttress was outside doing the heavy lifting. The aesthetic and spiritual consequences of this engineering breakthrough were utterly transformative. Cathedrals like Chartres, Notre Dame de Paris, and Amiens are the breathtaking results. Their interiors are not dark chambers but radiant spaces awash in kaleidoscopic color, as sunlight streams through acres of stained glass depicting biblical stories and saintly figures. This created an immersive sensory experience for the medieval worshipper. The physical world of stone seemed to dissolve, replaced by a heavenly realm of luminous, divine narrative. The architecture itself became a form of theology, a sermon in stone and light designed to elevate the soul toward God. The flying buttress, though primarily a structural element, contributed to this aesthetic. From the outside, these stone arcs create a dynamic and dramatic silhouette, a visible web of strength and grace that makes the building appear both powerfully anchored and miraculously light, as if the entire stone mass is floating upwards. This fusion of raw structural logic and sublime beauty is the hallmark of Gothic genius. The construction of these supports required a deep, albeit intuitive, understanding of physics and materials that was centuries ahead of its formal scientific explanation. The master masons who designed them had no textbooks on structural engineering. Their knowledge was empirical, passed down through guilds, and refined through sometimes catastrophic trial and error. They understood vectors of force, the behavior of compression in stone, and the critical importance of precise angles and proportions. Calculating the correct curvature of the arch and the optimal weight of the external pier was a delicate balancing act. Too little mass in the pier and it would not resist the thrust, too much and it would create new stresses. The fact that these structures, built with hand tools and human calculation, have stood for over 800 years through wars, weather, and even earthquakes is a staggering testament to the medieval mind's capacity for applied science. They were the civil engineers of their age, solving complex static problems with a combination of geometric intuition and practical craftsmanship. Ultimately, the flying buttress is more than an architectural feature. It is a powerful symbol of the medieval capacity to balance opposing forces, weight and lightness, earth and heaven, structure and spirit. It represents a moment in history where a technical solution directly enabled a profound artistic and religious vision. This innovation did not remain static. It was refined over generations, growing more slender and sophisticated as builders gained confidence in its principles. Its legacy extends far beyond the cathedral close, as the basic concept of externalizing support to create larger, lighter interior spaces is a foundational principle in modern architecture. The steel frames of skyscrapers and the expansive glass walls of contemporary buildings are all spiritual descendants of that first bold stone arch that dared to fly. It was a declaration that with ingenuity, even the heaviest of materials could be made to perform a kind of magic, holding up not just a roof, but the very aspirations of humanity. Amidst the quiet hum of the 13th century Italian paper mill, another layer of ingenuity was being pressed into existence, not with ink, but with the very structure of the page itself. This was the watermark, a subtle yet powerful innovation born from the practical needs of commerce that would leave an indelible mark on history. The process of creating one was a fascinating blend of artistry and precise mechanics. Papermakers would bend and shape fine wires into unique designs, a simple circle, a cross, a fleur-de-lis, or the distinct emblem of a specific workshop. This wire shape was then stitched onto the wooden mold, the screen-like tool used to scoop up the slurry of pulped rags that would become a sheet of paper. When the mold was lifted from the vat, the watery pulp settled across its surface, but it settled ever so slightly thinner wherever the wire pattern lay. This created a permanent, translucent impression in the paper, visible only when held up to the light. It was a signature woven into the fabric of the page itself, a testament to a craftsman's pride and a powerful tool in an increasingly document-driven world. This seemingly simple feature quickly evolved into one of the earliest and most effective systems for intellectual property protection and quality control the world had ever seen. In a bustling marketplace, a buyer could immediately identify the origin and quality of a batch of paper simply by holding a sheet to a window. A renowned paper mill's watermark was a trusted brand, a guarantee of consistent thickness and durability that a scribe or merchant could rely on. This allowed workshops to build reputations and command premium prices for their superior product. Conversely, it served as a potent anti-counterfeiting measure. Official documents, legal contracts, and currency could be produced on watermarked paper to deter forgery. Replicating the intricate wire pattern required insider knowledge and exceptional skill, making it incredibly difficult for counterfeiters to produce a convincing fake. This medieval innovation established the foundational principle that the medium itself could carry verified information about its origin and authenticity, a concept that now underpins everything from the holograms on our credit cards to the digital certificates that secure our online transactions. Beyond commerce and security, watermarks have bestowed an incredible, perhaps unintended, gift upon historians: the ability to accurately date and locate ancient manuscripts with remarkable precision. Because papermakers frequently changed their designs or made small modifications to their wire patterns, scholars have been able to create detailed chronological catalogues of these changes. When examining an undated medieval manuscript, a researcher can simply study its watermark, comparing the design, the spacing of the wires, and any unique flaws to these established catalogues. This allows them to pinpoint the paper's production to within a few years and often to a specific mill in a specific Italian town. This forensic tool has been indispensable in verifying the authenticity of historical documents, uncovering literary forgeries, and tracing the movement of texts and ideas across Europe. A watermark in the paper of a Galileo manuscript or a Chaucer folio acts as a silent, reliable witness, confirming its provenance and helping to piece together the intricate puzzle of our intellectual heritage. The legacy of the watermark is a profound reminder that some of the most enduring innovations are those that embed information directly into the structure of our tools. Those Italian papermakers, seeking merely to label their product and protect their trade, were pioneering the very concepts of branding and cryptographic authentication. They understood that trust could be physically manufactured into an object, that a signature could be made inseparable from the thing it represented. In today's digital world where we grapple with deepfakes and identity theft, the quest for verifiable authenticity is more urgent than ever. The modern digital watermark, though made of code rather than wire, serves the exact same purpose: to verify origin, protect copyright, and ensure integrity. This 700-year-old invention demonstrates a timeless human need to mark our work, to claim our creations, and to leave behind a subtle, lasting signature that whispers our contribution to the future long after we are gone. While the watermark was silently authenticating documents on land, another deceptively simple device was mastering the flow of time itself out on the rolling decks of ships and in the bustling kitchens of medieval homes. The hourglass, with its elegant symmetry and hypnotic stream of sand, emerged as a triumph of practical physics, offering a form of timekeeping that was both incredibly robust and exquisitely portable. Unlike its more complex cousin, the mechanical clock, the hourglass had no intricate gears to jam, no weights to wind, and no dependence on the weather like the sundial. Its operation was gloriously simple, relying on nothing more than the constant, predictable force of gravity pulling fine, dry sand through a precisely calibrated narrow neck of glass. This unwavering reliability made it the first truly democratic timepiece, a device that could be trusted in the pitching cabin of a cog in a North Sea gale just as easily as on the stable table of a monastic scribe. Its invention speaks to a medieval desire to compartmentalize time, to break the endless day into manageable, measurable portions for prayer, for work, and for navigation. The sheer versatility of this device is a testament to its perfect design. On the high seas, it became the navigator's most trusted companion. The traditional maritime watch was divided into shifts measured by the turning of the hourglass, with a ship's boy having the crucial duty of flipping it the moment the last grain fell and ringing the ship's bell to mark the passage of another half hour. This rhythmic cadence organized life aboard ship, ensuring a rested crew and a vigilant watch, but its role went far beyond scheduling. It was critical for dead reckoning. By using a half-minute or one-minute glass in conjunction with a knotted rope thrown overboard, a sailor could measure the ship's speed through the water and thus estimate the distance traveled on a chart. In the kitchen of a great house, an hourglass ensured a perfectly boiled egg or prevented a precious joint of meat from burning, bringing a new level of culinary precision. In the church, it measured the length of sermons, and in the university, it timed lectures and scholarly debates. The hourglass brought the discipline of measured time into the most mundane and the most critical aspects of daily life. Beneath its apparent simplicity lay a surprising depth of scientific insight that wouldn't be fully appreciated for centuries. Creating an accurate hourglass was a high craft that required solving complex problems in granular material science and fluid dynamics. The type of sand was crucial. It had to be fine, dry, and uniformly sieved to ensure a consistent flow rate without clumping. Marble dust, powdered eggshell, or even finely ground black sand from certain beaches were often used. The glassblower's skill was even more critical. The two bulbs had to be perfectly symmetrical, and the connecting neck had to be bored with incredible precision. A fraction too wide, and the sand would flow too fast, a hair too narrow, and it might clog or not flow at all. Furthermore, the sealed environment created a partial vacuum within the bulbs. Medieval glassmakers may not have understood the physics, but they knew empirically that this sealed environment prevented moisture from affecting the flow and ensured the device would perform consistently in different humidities and temperatures, a principle vital to later scientific instrument makers. Ultimately, the hourglass endures as one of the most powerful and poetic symbols to emerge from the Middle Ages. It represented the irreversibility of time, a stream of sand that could not be pushed back up into the upper bulb, a continuous, linear progression toward an inevitable end. This made it a potent memento mori, a reminder of mortality and the fleeting nature of earthly life, often depicted in paintings resting next to a skull. Yet it also symbolized order, precision, and humanity's attempt to impose structure on the chaos of existence. With each turn, it offered a reset, a new beginning, a fresh measure of time to be used wisely. This duality between relentless finality and renewable order captures the medieval mindset perfectly, a worldview that balanced spiritual contemplation of eternity with a practical desire to manage the here and now. The hourglass was not merely a timekeeper, it was a philosophical instrument, a silent meditation on the very nature of time itself, whose steady trickle of grains continues to remind us of moments passing long after its practical use has faded. Now imagine the sheer terror of witnessing a fortress wall, once thought impregnable, suddenly erupt in a shower of stone and dust under the impact of a 200-pound boulder launched from nearly 300 yards away. This was the devastating reality introduced by the counterweight Trebuchet, a machine so powerful it could literally reshape the landscape of a siege in a single shot. Unlike earlier torsion-based weapons like the Roman onager, which relied on the twisting tension of ropes or sinews, the trebuchet harnessed the relentless, predictable force of gravity itself. Its operating principle was a masterpiece of mechanical advantage. A massive weight box, often filled with tons of earth, stones, or lead, was attached to the short end of a giant pivoting beam. The long end of the beam held a sling cradling the projectile. To fire it, a team of men would use a winch to painfully lower the counterweight into the air, raising the projectile end to the ground. The projectile was loaded, and then, with a single release mechanism, the counterweight was set free. As it plummeted earthward, it whipped the long arm upward in a violent arc, launching the sling and its contents toward its target with a force that felt less like engineering and more like pure elemental fury. The construction and operation of these behemoths were feats of applied mathematics and physics that would challenge modern engineers, even with our advanced tools. Master carpenters and military engineers had to perform complex calculations to balance the machine perfectly. The ratio between the length of the short arm holding the counterweight and the long arm holding the sling was critical. A miscalculation could result in a pathetic throw or, worse, the machine tearing itself apart under the immense forces involved. The weight of the counterweight had to be precisely matched to the weight of the projectile. A heavier rock required a heavier counterweight to achieve the desired range and impact. Even the length of the sling was a carefully calibrated variable, as releasing the projectile at the exact optimal point in the arc was the difference between a high, lofting shot and a low, driving one. These medieval engineers were effectively solving advanced problems in leverage, rotational kinetics, and parabolic trajectory without the formal language of Newtonian physics, working from empirical knowledge, geometric principles, and hard-won experience passed down through generations of siege warfare. The psychological impact of the trebuchet on medieval warfare was as profound as its physical destruction. Before its arrival, besieging a well-fortified castle was often a grueling war of attrition, a slow process of mining, starving, or waiting for treachery from within. The trebuchet changed the calculus entirely. It allowed an attacking army to systematically dismantle a defender's strongest advantage, their walls, from a safe distance beyond the reach of arrows or sorties. The relentless, rhythmic bombardment, sometimes lasting for days, was a form of psychological torture for those inside. The sound of the winches groaning, the tremendous thud of the counterweight dropping, and the whistling approach of death from the sky created an atmosphere of unbearable tension and helplessness. Fortress designs, which had remained relatively static for centuries, were suddenly rendered obsolete. In response, military architects began designing thicker, lower walls with more sloping surfaces to better deflect and absorb these new impacts, sparking an arms race between offensive and defensive engineering that would continue for generations. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the counterweight trebuchet is how it perfectly encapsulates the medieval capacity to translate abstract scientific principles into world-altering practical applications. This was not a tool born from blind experimentation. It was the product of a deep, intuitive understanding of the natural world. The builders knew that gravity was a constant, unwavering force that could be stored and released on command through their complex machine. They understood that the path of a projectile was a predictable curve that could be adjusted with precision. In an age often wrongly characterized by superstition, the trebuchet stands as a monument to rational, calculated force. Its basic principle of using a counterweight to generate tremendous power influenced later inventions like the clock tower and even early industrial hammers. It demonstrated that the path to power lay not in magic, but in mathematics and mechanics, a lesson that would eventually help pave the way for the scientific revolution and the modern world of engineering that followed. Now consider the quiet, meticulous work happening high on the scaffolding of a rising cathedral, where the difference between enduring majesty and catastrophic collapse could be measured in the tilt of a single stone. In an age before laser guides and digital readouts, medieval builders possessed a secret weapon for ensuring such perfection: the mason's level. This deceptively simple tool, a straight edge of wood or metal with a curved glass vial fixed at its center, held the key to true horizontals and perfect verticals. Inside that vial, a single bubble of air floated in a pool of liquid, seeking the highest point with unwavering obedience to gravity. The principle was breathtakingly elegant. When the tool was placed on a surface, the bubble's position immediately revealed any deviation from level. For the master mason, this was not just a tool, it was an infallible oracle, a physical manifestation of the invisible force of equilibrium that governed his entire world. Its introduction from the 12th century onward marked a pivotal shift from approximate construction to precision engineering, enabling the gravity-defying architectural wonders we still marvel at today. The true genius of this device lies in its perfect marriage of intuitive operation and profound scientific principle. A mason didn't need to understand the complex physics of gravity and fluid dynamics to use it effectively. He simply had to watch the bubble. If it settled perfectly between two marked lines on the glass vial, he knew the surface was level or true. To check a vertical surface, a plumb bob, a weighted string attached to the level, would hang straight down, aligning with a central mark on the tool's base. This immediate visual feedback loop was revolutionary. It democratized precision, allowing a skilled craftsman to achieve near-perfect alignment without relying solely on his eye, which could be deceived by optical illusions or traditional methods like pouring water to find a level, which was impractical on a vertical wall. This tool put the laws of physics directly into the hands of the worker, transforming abstract concepts into a simple, repeatable process that could be taught and standardized across an entire work site, ensuring every stonemason, from apprentice to master, was building to the same exacting standard. The impact of this standardization on projects like the great Gothic cathedrals cannot be overstated. The stability of these soaring structures depended entirely on the precise placement of every single stone. If a course of masonry was laid even slightly out of level, the error would compound with each successive row, leading to uneven stress distribution, cracking, and potential structural failure over time. The mason's level was the essential quality control device that prevented this. It ensured that the massive piers intended to support vaulted ceilings were perfectly vertical, transmitting the immense weight directly downward into the foundations. It guaranteed that the beds of stone arches were level, allowing the keystone to lock everything into place with mathematical precision. When we look at the nave of a cathedral like Chartres, stretching forward in seemingly infinite, perfect parallel lines, we are witnessing the cumulative effect of thousands of individual measurements made with this humble tool. Its consistent use is the reason these buildings have not just survived for centuries, but have done so without significant settling or distortion, standing as permanent monuments to medieval craftsmanship's commitment to accuracy. Beyond its immediate practical application, the mason's level represents a monumental intellectual leap toward the concept of standardized measurement and repeatable quality in manufacturing. Before its widespread adoption, building was often a localized craft, with measurements based on the length of a particular master's foot or the span of his hand. The level introduced an objective, non-human standard of truth based on the immutable constant of gravity. A bubble centered between two lines meant the same thing on a building site in England as it did in France. This was a crucial step toward the kind of universal standards that would later enable the interchangeable parts of the Industrial Revolution. Furthermore, the very existence of such a tool implies a sophisticated understanding of geometry and a desire to impose rational, mathematical order on the natural world. The medieval mason, using his level, was participating in a centuries-old tradition of practical geometry, applying theoretical knowledge to create physical perfection. He was ensuring that his work was not just strong and beautiful, but true, a reflection of the divine order and harmony that he believed underpinned the universe itself. Now step into the world of a 14th-century merchant, returning home after a long journey with a chest full of silver coins and precious spices. His greatest peace of mind didn't come from an armed guard, but from an intricate piece of metalwork, a sophisticated lock and key mechanism that safeguarded his wealth. Far from the simple wooden bolts and latches of earlier eras, medieval locksmiths had elevated security into a high art form, crafting devices that were as much mechanical puzzles as they were protective barriers. The heart of their innovation was the warded lock, a design of breathtaking cleverness. Inside the lock's casing, obstructions known as wards, precisely shaped pieces of metal, were fixed around the keyhole. A key for such a lock was not a simple flat piece of metal. It was a complex object, its bit cut with a series of notches and channels that exactly matched the pattern of the internal wards. Only a key that could navigate this metallic maze like a ship through a treacherous reef would be able to rotate and retract the bolt. This meant that even if a thief could impression the keyhole, crafting a key that could bypass these carefully placed obstacles was a task of immense difficulty, requiring an intimate knowledge of the lock's unique internal geography. The skill required to produce these objects was extraordinary, placing locksmiths among the most respected metalworkers of their time. Each lock and its key were essentially a matched set, often forged and filed by the same artisan to ensure perfect, exclusive compatibility. The keys themselves were frequently small marvels of blacksmithing, featuring ornate bows shaped like hearts, flowers, or intricate geometric patterns, transforming a purely functional object into a piece of wearable art and a status symbol. The locks, especially those guarding church reliquaries or noble treasure chests, could be equally decorative, their surfaces engraved with family crests, religious iconography, or mythical beasts. This fusion of form and function speaks to the deep value placed on security. Protecting one's valuables was not just a practical concern but a point of pride, worthy of significant investment and artistic expression. A beautifully crafted lock was a public declaration of what lay within was worth protecting, and the owner's ability to command the skill to protect it. Some designs pushed far beyond the warded lock into realms of bewildering complexity that feel almost playful in their ingenuity. Locks with multiple keyholes required 2 separate keys to be turned in sequence. Others featured hidden keyholes concealed behind sliding panels or decorative elements, so that even finding the point of entry was a challenge. Perhaps most fascinating were the trick locks, designed to confound and capture. A thief attempting to pick a lock with the wrong tool might trigger a mechanism that would snap shut, trapping his pick, or even his finger, inside, providing undeniable evidence of the attempted crime. These devices were less like simple fasteners and more like 3-dimensional logic puzzles crafted from iron and brass, designed to outwit an adversary through mechanical misdirection and surprise. They represent a fascinating psychological dimension to medieval security, anticipating the mind of the intruder and engineering a response that was as much about intellectual combat as physical barrier. The legacy of these medieval mechanisms is etched into the very language and technology of our modern world. The principles of wards, tumblers, and rotating keys they pioneered are the direct mechanical ancestors of the pin tumbler lock invented by Linus Yale in the 19th century, which remains the standard for houses and padlocks today. Every time we turn a key in a door, we are performing an action whose basic mechanics were perfected in the workshops of medieval smiths. More profoundly, this innovation highlights a fundamental and timeless human desire for personal sovereignty over space and property. The medieval lock was a physical manifestation of the concept of privacy, a way to create an inviolable private realm, be it a home, a chest, or a diary, in a world that often offered little of it. It addressed a deep-seated need for safety and control, proving that long before digital passwords and biometric scanners, the human mind was already devising beautifully complex mechanical solutions to the ancient problem of keeping our treasures safe from prying eyes and unwelcome hands. Yet, even as the most powerful crossbows were changing the face of warfare, they presented their users with an immense and exhausting physical challenge. The sheer muscle power required to draw the string of a military-grade weapon, often boasting a draw weight exceeding 1,000 pounds, was beyond the capability of even the strongest soldier. Early spanning methods like the belt hook or the goat's foot lever provided some mechanical help, but they were still slow, cumbersome, and left the archer physically drained before even taking a shot. This limitation created a frustrating bottleneck. You could build an incredibly powerful bow, but actually using it effectively in the heat of battle was another matter entirely. The invention of the cranquin in the late Middle Ages was the elegant and brilliant solution to this problem, a device that didn't just add power but fundamentally redefined the relationship between the human body and the machine it operated. This geared marvel transformed the act of loading from a feat of raw strength into a simple, mechanical procedure, unlocking the full potential of the heavy crossbow with a simple turn of a crank. The mechanism itself was a compact masterpiece of precision engineering, a small box of interconnected gears that acted as a personal winch for the crossbowman. It was typically mounted to the stock of the weapon just behind the trigger mechanism. The key to its operation was a sturdy, crank-operated pinion gear that engaged with a larger rack gear. When the soldier turned the crank handle, this primary gear would rotate, its teeth catching on the rack and pulling it linearly. This rack was, in turn, attached to a pair of sturdy claws that gripped the crossbow string. With every smooth, easy rotation of the crank, the rack would pull the claws, and therefore the string a precise, incremental distance backward. The true stroke of genius was the integrated ratchet and pawl system. This component allowed the gears to move freely in one direction while locking them in place in the other. This meant the archer could turn the crank to draw the string, and the ratchet would automatically hold the tension at every step, preventing the string from slipping back even if he paused or released the crank. This eliminated the need for a constant, straining pull and made the entire process safe, controlled, and remarkably efficient. The tactical advantages bestowed by the cranequin were nothing short of revolutionary on the medieval battlefield. First and foremost, it dramatically increased the rate of effective fire. A soldier using a belt hook might manage a shot every minute, needing significant recovery time between each exhausting draw. A cranequin-equipped crossbowman, by contrast, could span his weapon in under 30 seconds with minimal physical fatigue, potentially doubling or tripling his rate of fire during an engagement. This was a huge force multiplier for any army. Secondly, and just as crucially, it drastically improved accuracy. A soldier who was not gasping for breath and trembling from muscle fatigue could hold his weapon steadier, aim more carefully, and release his shot with greater control. This made the already lethal crossbow into a truly precise instrument, capable of picking off key targets like enemy knights, officers, or engineers with terrifying reliability from a safe distance. The cranequin effectively removed the human body as the limiting factor, allowing the mechanical power of the weapon to be fully and consistently utilized by any trained operator, regardless of their individual strength. Beyond its immediate military application, the cranequin stands as a profound symbol of the medieval mind's growing mastery over mechanical advantage and the transfer of energy. This was not a simple lever. It was a complex system of interlocking gears that traded rotational distance for immense linear force. The soldier turning the crank might make 20 full rotations to move the string just a few inches, but each of those rotations required only a small, manageable amount of effort. The cranequin was in essence a portable factory for mechanical advantage, a device that multiplied a human's input force dozens of times over. This sophisticated understanding of gear ratios and force translation was a conceptual leap that would become absolutely central to the machinery of the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. The same principle of using a small, continuous input to achieve a large, powerful output is found in everything from the winches on sailing ships and the capstans used in construction to the gearboxes in modern automobiles and machinery. The medieval armorer who developed the cranequin was perhaps unknowingly building a working model of a fundamental principle that would power the modern world. In many ways, the cranequin represents the pinnacle of medieval personal weapon innovation, a perfect fusion of power, precision, and ergonomic design. It exemplifies the period's relentless drive to refine and improve existing technology, to push tools to their absolute limits through clever engineering rather than just sheer size or brute force. It marked a final step in the evolution of the crossbow from a simple tension weapon into a truly mechanized system, a precursor to the automatic loading mechanisms of firearms that would eventually replace it. The cranequin-equipped crossbowman was one of the most technologically advanced soldiers on the pre-gunpowder battlefield, a testament to how medieval ingenuity could place incredible power directly into the hands of the individual, changing not just how wars were fought, but how humans conceived of their own ability to harness and control mechanical force. Yet, even as the cranequin was perfecting the mechanics of warfare, another innovation was emerging that would forever change the substance of what those battles were fought over: knowledge itself. The medieval paper mill represents a quiet but monumental shift in the very fabric of civilization, moving the recording of information from the painstaking, expensive craft of parchment to the rhythmic, mechanized production of a new and democratic medium. Before its establishment in Europe in the 13th century, the written word was largely confined to the privileged spaces of monasteries and royal courts. Parchment made from the carefully scraped and treated skins of sheep or calves was incredibly costly and time-consuming to produce. A single Bible might require the skins of over 200 animals, making books objects of immense value and rarity, often literally chained to their lecterns. The paper mill shattered this scarcity by harnessing the power of water and the abundance of rags, transforming the cast-off linen and cotton of daily life into a smooth, uniform, and most importantly affordable surface for writing. This was recycling on an industrial scale, turning the old into the new and in the process, building the foundation for an information revolution. The process itself, centered in a water-powered mill, was a sophisticated symphony of mechanics and chemistry that would feel familiar to any modern industrial engineer. It began with the raw material, discarded textiles, primarily linen and hemp, which were sorted, washed, and left to rot slightly to weaken the fibers. These rags were then fed into the heart of the machine, the water-powered trip hammers. A large water wheel turned a camshaft that lifted a series of heavy wooden hammers, studded with iron nails, which then dropped with relentless force into a trough, pounding the rags into a pulpy mass. This mechanized beating was the key to efficiency, replacing the days of manual stamping with a continuous, powerful process. The resulting pulp was then mixed with water in a large vat to create a slurry. Here, the vatman performed his delicate art, dipping a rectangular wire screen mold into the soupy mixture and lifting it out with a deft shake to evenly distribute the fibers and drain the water, forming a single, fragile sheet of paper. This sheet was then transferred to a woolen felt cloth, stacked with others, and pressed by a massive screw press to remove the remaining water. Finally, the damp sheets were hung in large lofts to air dry. This entire sequence, from pounding rags to pressing sheets, was a coordinated production line, an early and breathtakingly efficient example of continuous process manufacturing that predated the factories of the Industrial Revolution by centuries. The societal impact of this newfound abundance of paper was nothing less than transformative, slowly but irrevocably democratizing knowledge and reshaping the structures of power. With paper far more affordable than parchment, its use expanded far beyond the sacred texts of the church. Town clerks could now keep detailed records of births, deaths, property transactions, and legal disputes, creating the detailed administrative archives that historians now rely upon. Merchants and bankers adopted it for account books, bills of lading, and letters of credit, enabling the complex financial instruments that fueled long-distance trade and the commercial revolution. In universities, which were themselves a burgeoning medieval innovation, students could afford to own their own copies of lecture notes and texts, facilitating a more personal and widespread engagement with learning. This gradual increase in literacy and record-keeping created a more documented, bureaucratic, and ultimately more modern society. The very act of governing and doing business began to depend on the flow of paper, creating a new class of clerks, notaries, and scribes whose power lay not in land or arms, but in their mastery of the written word on this new, accessible medium. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the medieval paper mill is its role as a direct and essential precursor to the printing press. This is a crucial point often overlooked. Gutenberg's revolution in the 15th century would have been impossible without the prior revolution in paper production that occurred over the previous 200 years. Movable type required a smooth, consistent, and absorbent writing surface that was available in large quantities and at a reasonable cost. Parchment, with its irregularities, high price, and limited supply, would have been utterly incapable of supporting the mass production of books. The paper mill created the essential ecosystem, the affordable substrate that allowed the printing press to flourish. The relentless water-powered hammers that pulped the rags were the necessary first step before the metal type could ever be set. In this way, the paper mill was not just a contemporary of other medieval innovations. It was the enabler of the next great leap forward, providing the physical platform upon which the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution would all be written. It stands as a powerful testament to the fact that information technology is not just about the tools that record ideas, but also about the medium that carries them, and the medieval world had masterfully industrialized the production of that very medium. From the intricate heartbeat of the mechanical clock to the transformative power of the paper mill, our journey through these 26 inventions utterly shatters the dusty, outdated myth of the Dark Ages. We have not been exploring a stagnant void in human history, but a vibrant, dynamic, and fiercely intelligent period, a 1,000-year-long workshop of ingenuity where monks, merchants, metalworkers, and masons were laying the very groundwork for the modern world. Each of these breakthroughs, from the humble button to the soaring flying buttress, stands as a powerful testament to a time when necessity was not just the mother of invention, but its master engineer, its patient teacher, and its most ambitious patron. These were not lucky accidents or isolated flashes of brilliance. They were the products of careful observation, relentless experimentation, and a profound desire to understand and improve the human experience. This legacy is not confined to history books or museum displays. It is woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Every time we check the time on our phones, we are following the rhythm first measured by medieval clockmakers. Every time we put on a pair of glasses, we are seeing the world more clearly through a technology refined in 13th century Italian workshops. The very concept of a secure private home, warmed by an efficient fireplace and locked with a sturdy mechanism, is a direct inheritance from the medieval mind. These inventors gave us the tools to build taller, navigate farther, farm smarter, fight harder, and live more comfortably. They democratized vision, mechanized production, harnessed natural forces, and began the long process of recording and disseminating knowledge on a scale never before imagined. They were, in every sense, the foundational architects of our contemporary reality. Perhaps the most important lesson here is that progress is never a straight line, and genius is never confined to a single era. It is a collaborative, cumulative dance across centuries where an idea conceived in a medieval forge might find its full expression in a modern microchip. The next time you encounter a challenge or marvel at a new technology, remember the long chain of innovation that made it possible, a chain whose links were forged in the fires of the Middle Ages. This hidden history urges us to look beyond simplistic labels and to approach the past with curiosity and respect, for within its depths we often find the most inspiring blueprints for our future. Thank you so much for exploring these hidden marvels with us. If you enjoyed this journey into the unexpected genius of the Middle Ages, please give this video a like, subscribe for more adventures into the past, and let us know in the comments which invention surprised